Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today's tutorial is for the Breakthrough Bag from Just An E Designs. This is her latest release, and just like all of her other patterns, this one's super cute and fun and a great sew. Let's go ahead and look at some of the design features for this bag. The main thing we want to look at is this unique flap. It has this cute little cutout and a nice strap designed to close the bag. When we open this up, which is closed with a magnetic snap, we have a wide opening at the top. Have my strap in there. We have a slip pocket on one side and a zipper pocket on the other side. The strap is a simple strap that can be worn as a crossbody or a shoulder bag and connects with the two strap connectors. I'm going to put a link for everything I talk about in this video in my description below. I will have a link for the pattern. I will have a link for Just An E's Facebook group. I'm also going to have a link for where you can get this material, which is from J&R Edwards, the vinyl and this fabric, and also the vinyl and fabric that I'm going to be sewing up today is also going to be from J&R Edwards, so you'll see that there as well. So now let's talk about the pieces that we're going to need for this bag. I'm going to start with the strap connectors. I'm using vinyl for mine. So I cut out the piece, draw a line down the middle, and then I fold those raw edges right to meet that line. It looks like this. I'm going to top stitch down both sides, and then that is what I'll fold in half and add my 1-inch connector onto. So that is your two strap connectors. The next thing we'll talk about is our flap strap. If you're using fabric, you will have two of these, and it will look just like this. This is how it'll look folded. Put these aside. If you're using vinyl, you only need one because the pattern designer said that it gets a little too thick if you use two and have to fit that hardware at the bottom. You will also need a magnetic snap to attach this strap or your flap to the exterior of your bag. The next thing we're going to talk about is our lining. I'm going to be using a cotton woven for my lining. I'll try to hold this up so you can see the entire piece. There's notches at the bottom. And if you're using cotton woven, you can just interface it with a mid-weight interfacing, which is like a SF101 or an equivalent. So we have two pieces of that. Then we're going to have a zipper pocket lining. And we're also going to have a slip pocket lining. If your slip pocket is directional like mine is, just know that on the inside of your pocket it will be upside down. If that bothers you, you could either cut out two pieces out of seam allowance or you could just use a non-directional print. After I cut out my slip pocket, I did interface it with SF101 equivalent, and then I went ahead and folded it right sides together against that long edge and clipped in place. So we'll put that aside. That is all you need, 4 pieces for your lining. Then we're to our exterior of the bag. I'm going to use vinyl. So I'm using this vinyl, and I did go ahead and use the pattern to mark and attach my magnetic snap. For your main body exterior, the pattern calls for you to attach fleece to it. I didn't want to use fleece on this vinyl. I think instead I'm going to switch that to Decaville Light. In both of these bags I use the fleece with the cotton woven, and I love the way it feels. I just didn't know if the fleece would feel good on the vinyl, so I'm just going to switch up that. I'm still going to use fleece in my flap though. You can see your two exteriors do have the cutouts at the bottom. So those are the two pieces for your exterior. The last thing we're going to talk about is our flap. We will have two flap pieces. I'm showing you from the back first just so we can talk because I already have some things clipped on the front. So you will have an exterior and a lining. If you are doing a directional print, make sure that you cut your lining upside down so that when you open your flap, the print is going in the right direction. So this is my exterior flap. I went ahead and attached, and I just clipped, they're not actually sewn on or anything, the parts that I need for my cutout. We're going to talk about the proper placement of these as we go along and how we get this shape on there. This is going to be my lining. You can see it's upside down. So the lining flap will actually open, whenever we open it up, it'll be right side up. I've went ahead and attached the cutout piece on it also. So we need is our flap cutout square. I just cut mine out of the same material as my flap. Make sure it's cut out of a cotton woven, SF101 or equivalent on the back. This will not be seen after our flap is constructed. And the last thing you need is your strap. So I went ahead and sewed just a basic strap. I attached 1-inch swivel hooks on the bottom. If you need help with making a strap, just let me know. She does have the instructions in the pattern on how to make the strap, and I feel like we basically know how to make one, so I didn't want to waste your time on that part. I'm going to sew things in a different order than the pattern suggests. You can easily sew it up however you want. This is just what works better for me. So I'm going to start with my strap connectors. You'll have 2 of those. Just like I said before, you draw the line down the middle, fold in your raw edges. It'll look like this. Then you're going to top stitch down each long edge. For the flap strap holder, I'm going to do 2 because I've yet to decide which one I'm using. For the fabric piece, I am going to have 2 of these, and I'm going to draw a line down the middle. I'll fold the raw edges to that line, just like I did with the strap connector. It'll look like this. Then I will take both of these pieces and I will put them wrong sides together, clip in place, and then I will top stitch down the long edges of these as well. For the vinyl, I'm just going to do a top stitch down each long edge of this. My vinyl is very thin, so I am going to do 2 layers, but if it doesn't fit my strap end, I don't have to worry because I have my fabric there also. Whether you are doing your flap strap connector in vinyl or in fabric, you will have to attach a magnetic snap. For me, I'm using a rivet magnetic snap, so I do not need to attach mine before I sew them together. However, if you are doing a magnetic snap with prongs, if you're using the fabric version, before you sew these 2 pieces together, go ahead and attach it. If you're doing a vinyl with only 1 piece, it doesn't matter. If you're doing 2 pieces like I'm doing, you would need to attach it there also. The pattern does give the measurements for where you attach that magnetic snap. The last thing I'm going to sew up in this segment is I'm going to do my slip pocket. I'll start stitching here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch, go here, back stitch, break the stitches and leave this opening for me to turn my slip pocket, start stitching here and go down here, back stitching with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now that I got these pieces sewn up, I'm going to take my 2 flap strap connectors. I'm just going to set them aside. I don't need to do anything else with them right now. My 2 strap connectors, I'm going to go ahead and slide on my 1-inch D-rings, and then I'm just going to baste to keep them closed. The pattern doesn't say that. It just helps me make it a little easier whenever I install them at the end. So for my slip pocket, I'm just going to trim those little corners. I don't need to trim anything else because it was just a 1/4 inch, but I just want to make those corners to be nice and neat. Then I'm just going to berth it, poke out the corners. You can take it over the iron and get this pressed out. And then I'll top stitch along that top sewn edge, or folded edge I should say. I pull along that opening to close up that gap, and then I can press it out, take it over the iron, whichever you want to do. You can choose to top stitch and close that opening right now, or you can flip it and top stitch on the bottom, whichever you like. I think I'm going to go ahead and top stitch there at the top so I can go ahead and make sure that's closed right away. Have that top stitch. I'm just going to fold to find the center. I want to pull out one of my lining panels. I'm going to fold to find its center. The pattern tells you how far down you measure to place your slip pocket. I have mine marked, and I'm just going to place my slip pocket there. It's centered, and I will have the correct measurements on it. Whenever you do this slip pocket, you're going to stitch around the sides, the bottom, and come back up. Make sure you back stitch really well here. If you want to add a divider, you can go ahead and do that on the center. You could even do small divisors if you want small pockets for pins and things, your choice. So I'll go ahead and take that over to my machine, stitch that on, and baste my D-ring connectors, and then I'll set all of these three components aside until we need them later. The next thing we need to do is we need to work on our other lining piece that has the zipper pocket. We close this bag through the opening in the bottom of the lining, so if you don't feel like attaching or adding a zipper pocket, you don't have to. It's just a nice feature if you want it in your bag. So on your lining panel piece, I have it placed on the lining panel right sides together. The pattern gives the measurements for the box you draw. It gives you the measurements for how down far you place your lining panel, how far down you draw your box, and how big your box is. I'm going to go ahead and get this measured properly, and then I'll start sewing. I'm going to sew the box. I only sew the long sides. I do not sew the short sides. And I know you probably can't see that clearly because it's on black, but it is on there. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that I back stitch well on each side, and then we'll cut this open, push the lining through, and attach our zipper. Lining pocket has been sewn on. I'm going to fold it just to get started clipping on that middle line that I drew. If you can't see mine clearly, the pattern does have great pictures to show you. I cut down the middle of that box, and then I cut the triangles without cutting into the stitches. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this lining through. I'm going to take it over to my ironing board and get this ironed and pressed flat so that we can install the zipper and finish this pocket. I have the zipper lining pushed through, and I took it over the iron and pressed it flat. You can see from the back, this is what it looks like. I'm just going to take my zipper with my pull attached to it. I'm going to simply put that in the middle and have the teeth lined up in the middle of that zipper box, and then I'm just going to sew around the zipper box, around that edge that is folded and pushed back 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Since I do not sew the corners of my zipper box, the short sides I should say, I make sure that I have those triangles pushed through whenever I'm ironing, and that way I can sew over them directly. You can use double-sided tape along the long side of the edges of this if you want to. My zipper tape is attached to my lining panel. I'm going to flip this over, and then I'm just going to take my lining at the bottom and pull it up. Then we're just going to sew the 3 unsewn sides. I put a few clips in there. I will sew this with my lining panel up so that I will be able to flip it out of the way and sew the lining easily. I'm just going to sew with like a 3/8 inch seam allowance. It doesn't really matter too much. I'm really just closing that box up. The lining is closed, and now both of my lining pieces have been finished. I'm going to take them both out. Now that we have both the lining pieces finished, we are going to attach them together. What we're going to do is we're going to clip along the sides and the bottom. On the sides, we are going to start with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here at the top. Then we're going to veer out to about 5/8 of an inch just to prevent the lining from being baggy. We're going to continue that down to the bottom. At the bottom, I'm going to leave an opening maybe 4 or 5 inches for us to turn the bag. We will backstitch at the fronts and the backs of these stitches for our opening. So when we're pulling that exterior through, we're not opening the bag anymore. So we're going to do this. I think the seam allowance on the bottom is 1/2 of an inch. If it's not, I'll pop up the correct seam allowances on the screen, but I think it's going to be 3/8, veer out to 5/8, and then 1/2 an inch, leaving our opening at the bottom. Now that I have that stitch, I'm just going to open up these seams and I'm going to box those corners, and then that will complete our lining. When I box my corners, I like to put my hand inside and open everything up from there, and just so it kind of folds naturally. If we try to just pull from the corners, lots of times we don't get it flat and it just doesn't work out. So it's always best if you can go in the middle and pull it that way. Now that we have our corners boxed, we're just going to sew across the edge of this, making sure we back stitch on both sides. And then we are done with our lining and we'll start working on our exterior. Now it's time to work on our exterior. I went ahead and applied a layer of Decaville Light or its equivalent onto my exterior panels since mine are vinyl. If you're using cotton, I do suggest the fleece just because it gave such a great feel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line these up and I'm just going to clip along the bottom. We're going to sew along this bottom edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to open up those seams and sew along each side just so we create kind of a stable base so it sits flat whenever you sit it down. I will make sure to backstitch at the front in the beginning because we'll be boxing these corners too. I've got the bottom sewed together and I did top stitch on both sides of that seam. Now I'm just going to clip my sides and sew down both sides with that same 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that we have our sides sewn together, we are going to box the corners. We're going to box the corners just like we did with our lining. Now that we have the corners boxed, I'm just going to do a quick trim of those seams, and then I'm going to flip this bag out. So now that we have our exterior sewn together and completed, we're going to attach our D-ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that side seam and I'm going to baste this connector on. I'm going to have about 1/4 of an inch hanging above the raw edge. So you can see raw edges are together up here. The D-ring is facing down. It's going to be centered right along that seam, and about 1/4 of an inch is above. So I'm just going to put a clip here to hold this in place, and I'm going to sew both of these on. Okay, I have those basted on. I'm going to set my exterior aside because the last thing we need to do is complete that flap, and then we'll put everything together. So let's go over our flap. I'm using fabric for my flap. I already have it interfaced with the SF101. I am also going to put fleece on this flap, but I'm going to do it after I do my cutout. The pattern says go ahead and do it before, and I did, and I had no trouble, but I just felt like I'm going to go ahead and be ironing this open, and I feel like I can just use the fleece all over it then after I have that cutout, instead of worrying to make sure I don't get the fleece caught in the seam allowance. So whenever we have this flap, the first thing we do is we take out our squares, our flap cutout squares. When you can put my flap squares together, you can see this image is mirrored. In your pattern, you will have a cutout for this image. You will take it and you will center it on here, and you will draw very carefully around that shape to get mirrored images. One will be face up, one will be face down. On your exterior flap, you want to, this is my exterior, my design's going the right way, I want to place it on the left. The pattern gives the exact measurements, but what I want you to check is the measurements going from the sides and at the bottom to make sure you have it properly in place. Also, you can see you'll have part of your square will be hanging off. That is normal. You can see in her pictures that'll be the same way there. This side piece, you'd want to make sure you get far enough in according to the pattern so that you can have, because we're going to sew this and we don't want it to be too skinny. Does that make sense? So use your measurements to check your sides and your bottom to make sure you have this piece placed properly. On the exterior, it looks this side. On my flap, my design is going upside down, and I'm going to have this square on the opposite side. So when I sew them together, the hole will be at the same place. So you can see on my lining piece, my square is on the right. I am going to get these, I'm going to get out my roller and I'm going to measure both of these, make sure I have them placed right. And then all I'm going to do is stitch carefully on the lines I've already drawn. I'm going to start at the straight area and I'll back stitch, and then I'll go all the way around. I'm going to stitch very slowly, even though I'll have it sped up for the video. It's really going to be going super slow to make sure I stay on that line to get these sewn on. So I have everything measured and in place the way I want it. Before I start sewing it, I wanted to talk about one more thing. As long as you measure these both the same way, they're going to fit, but there is a little bit of leeway with the flap at the top, so if you need to adjust, you can. That's the main thing, is making sure they're evenly spaced. And another thing I felt like was important is that I did make sure I had enough space accounting for the seam allowance on the side here. I didn't want too skinny of a strip on the side. So those are the things. Follow the pattern measurements, check the sides and the bottom, and make sure they're the same. As long as they're the same, it's going to be cute no matter what. So don't get too stressed. That was the biggest part for me, is I kept worrying about the placement of these, but it really is okay, and it turned out perfect every time, even though I was stressed over it. So now I have both of these sewn on to the flap piece. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut out the center. I'm going to leave about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance inside. So I fold it in half and I just do a snip to get it started. And then I'm just going to start cutting around. Okay, so now I have that center cut out, and I'm going to start making snips. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a snip right into the middle here. I'm not going to cut through my stitches, of course. And then I'm going to cut another one, this other diagonal, getting close to the stitches, but not through. You want to get as close as you can, and if you're having problems with it pulling through, you just need to get a little bit closer. I'm going to make these snips all the way around this cutout. So what I like to do is I like to start right here at the seam, on the flat part I should say, and push it forward first. Once I push that flat part through, I go ahead and put a clip there. Then I go ahead at the bottom and I push that flat part through first. Once you get those two flat pieces pushed through, it kind of helps everything else to go. But it is a little bit of a process to get it all pushed through. Take it over the ironing board, and I am going to probably use double-sided tape after I iron it down to kind of help hold it into place. Because after we do this, we will have to top stitch around there. So if you didn't have double-sided tape or something to help, it would probably just keep unfolding and not be a really good fit. You can see it's going really nice. If you're having spots where it won't go through, just look, turn it around and look and see if you've clipped in far enough so that it will lay nicely. Okay, so now I have that all pushed through and clipped into place. I'm going to take this over the ironing board, iron it really well. Like I said, I will probably put double-sided tape all along here to hold that flat. This is also going to be when I add my fleece. Of course, I'm not going to add fleece anywhere around here, but I'm going to add it everywhere else to kind of help stabilize that. I'm also going to repeat this same process for this lining flat piece, and then we will come back and we'll talk about our next steps. So I took my flat piece over to the ironing board and I cut everything out. I fused it down. I did add a layer of double-sided tape to kind of help hold that in place. I went ahead and put a layer of fusible fleece over that to kind of give it a little bit more structure and a little bit of a better feel. Now I have both of my flat pieces clipped right sides together. What I do is I line up this opening first. You can see that there's some overhang. I don't care about that so much. I can trim that up. I want this to be really nice and pretty. So clip that up first, or line it up first, I should say, and then you can clip everything else around, and we'll deal with that later if we need to trim up. We're going to sew the sides, the bottom, and back up here, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're leaving this top open so we can turn it that way. So let's go ahead and get that sewn together now and see how beautiful our little cutout looks. I have my flap sewn together. Let's go ahead and turn this around. I'm just going to trim up my sides just a little bit. Not really like a necessary thing. I just want to clean it up a little bit. And then we're going to turn and top stitch. So I have my flap turned inside out. I went ahead and took the time to poke out the corners, make it sure everything looks good. You can see my opening is lining up nicely. If you need to shift, like right here, I can see I need to shift a little. So I'm going to pull that down, put a clip there, and just kind of secure that in place. It's not going to be like exactly perfect without you shifting. You'll have to push and pull a little bit, and it'll line up really nice. Then if there's any overhang or anything you need to do at the top, do that at the top, but make sure that looks really good around there. I love the way it looks perfect. Flip it up, and the lining is going the right way, which is a good thing for me because sometimes I forget to do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch this entire thing. I'm going to top stitch first around this cutout. That's what I'll do first. I'll start down here, I think. And because this is the spot where it's the skinniest, and this would be the most likely to shift. So I'll probably start here and go all the way around and come back here and close those stitches up. Then I'm going to stitch all the way around this flap, even the top, to close it up. 1/8 of an inch away from everything. And then we're going to put this on the exterior and finish up our bag. Okay, so I finished top stitching around the entire perimeter of the flap and also around this cutout. I love it. It looks great. So I am going to go ahead and add this to my exterior. I'm going to put my strap on last because I'm doing a rivet, so it's fine for me to do that. So I'm going to wait till the very end. So let me go ahead and pull out my exterior. So I pulled out my exterior. Here's my front with my magnetic snap. I have my 2 connectors on. I'm going to attach my flap on the back side, and I want it right sides together with the back. So this is my lining. My lining is facing up. If you have already attached your little strap flap here, like the pattern has you do, they have it, you already attach it, your magnet will be facing up as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to base this in place. And I'm going to sew it from this. So what I'll do is I'll kind of push this down out of the way so I can get right in there and sew it like this. I don't know if I mentioned it, but you do want this flap centered on the back between your 2 connectors. Okay, so now that you have that basted in place, you'll pull out your lining. I'm going to now insert my exterior into my lining. I'm going to have them right sides together. Don't forget that your lining is a little bit shorter, a little bit tighter than your exterior. That is normal. If you're having trouble, you can pull some of it through the bottom, or you can just smush it down, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up that seam, and I'm going to start matching the seams first. And then after I get the 2 seams matched, then I'll go around the rest of the bag just clipping everything in place. So now I have everything clipped right sides together. The lining is on the outside, the exterior is down below. I made sure that the flap was down below. Also, don't forget that your connectors may be up at about 1/4 of an inch, and that is what they should look like. I'm going to go ahead and sew around the perimeter of this bag, making sure I back stitch and with the full seam allowance of 3/8 of an inch. So now I've top stitched around the top of the bag. I'm just going to trim the seams a little, but I am not trimming the areas with the connector or strap connectors. I'm leaving them alone, so I'm just going to trim just a little. Now I'm going to go through this opening here at the bottom, and I'm going to pull out my exterior and push my lining in the right way. I'm going to roll these seams down, and then I'm going to top stitch all around this bag. I'm going to make sure my strap connectors are up when I top stitch on both sides, and I'm also going to have my flap up when I'm top stitching, because if I would have it down, of course it wouldn't fold. If you want, you could always flip this bag inside out so you'll be able to top stitch on the exterior. I'm going to leave mine this way. I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away all around the perimeter of the bag. So I top stitched around the bag, and then I went ahead and pulled out my lining, and now I'm just going to close up that opening in the lining of the bag. I'm going to push the lining into the bag. And the last thing we got to do is put the strap closure on. So I've got to decide which one I want to use at this point. Oh my gosh, I love that. It looks so pretty already. So the last thing to do is to add the little strap flap holder. I have decided to go with the vinyl. It looks really good, I think, that little nice pop of color. So all you do is you take that piece you've already made and you're going to wrap it around there. Now you could do something like a rivet or sewing or whatever. I'm not going to do any of that. I think it looks really good there. If I want later, I may rivet this in place and add a rivet, but right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slip on that bottom connector. This is just a cheap strap end. I get these on Amazon, but you can have, there's some really nice ones, some decorative ones, some with screws. I don't have those. Some people even put like a layer of glue in there to hold that in place. That's an option too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the end right here, and I will have to use vice grips or pliers, whichever you have, to hold this in place and push it down so that it latches on really tightly. I can't push it with my fingers. I don't have this strength. I usually wrap cloth around it to hold it in place to make sure that I don't scratch the hardware or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera, and then I'll be back to show you that. The last thing I'll need to do is add my magnetic snap, and then I am done. So I went ahead and put on the strap hardware using the, I just use like pliers or something, vice grip, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, I pushed that on there. I did use a piece of cloth so I didn't damage that. I went ahead and installed my riveted magnet, and I attached my strap so you could see that everything is completed. I love it. I think it looks great, and I think it's a great pattern. I'm sure I'm going to make many more of these. This is my third one, and I still love it just as much. If you have any questions or concerns or anything, just let me know, and I hope you enjoy this pattern as much as I do. Like I said, the link will be in description, and I hope you have a great day sewing, and please share yours that you make in the Facebook group so I can see them too. Thanks so much.